development goals and industrialization goals, as well as our clean energy goals and so on. So without much further ado, let me say thank you very much for joining us again. And we have online participants. We have yourselves here in the audience also joining us. We will have a Q&A session as well. So do have your questions ready when you, as you are thinking and as you're listening to the panel discussion. We'll make sure there's time and so that we have a bit of interaction as well there. So first things first, over to you, Ike, to present the report on green environmental manufacturing.
Hi, everyone. So ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Ike. I'm the Development Reimagined Climate Program Manager, and it's a great pleasure for me to give a presentation at the Africa Climate Week 2023 and to share some of our findings from the report we are working, which is called Unleashing Africa's Untapped Potential for Environmental Goods Manufacturing. And hope my very short presentation can also set up a foundation, a floor for our panel discussion later. So environmental goods, if we define very broadly, we can just to mention for those goods to measure, prevent, limit, minimize, or correct environmental damage. So maybe let me start a question. So what's the future outcome of the environmental goods, especially in Africa continent? Is that the next potential vaccine famine or food famine, or where Africa countries are primarily depends on imports? Or is that the next potential for sovereignty or health sovereignty agenda and success? And our aim with this report is to support Africa governments to go beyond just thinking about renewable energy or critical mineral strategy and develop a truly long-term vision that avoids the former and stimulates the later. So before we dive into Africa current status about the EG, like environmental goods, so let me share some background data. So as you can see on the screen, like the figure 1, the global EG, like environmental goods or EG in short, market is growing at a very fast speed in the last 2 decades. So it grows is mainly attributed to development countries like the US, German, Japan, and also emerging market like the China. And trade is a very key driver of this growth, with global trade in environmental goods growing from 437.9 billion in 1994 to 1.16 trillion in 2021. But how's the status of Africa's EG market? So like the Africa only accounts for 1% of global EG trade. And in Africa, EG trade itself, imports account for 77.5% of total trade. And with a very high disparity in EG participation in Africa. So there's 4 countries accounting for more than 70% of the trade volume, which is South Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, and Morocco. So what's the current progress of Africa countries on EG manufacturing policy? So our team have conducted a wide range research for all Africa countries, and Africa countries have relevant environmental good policy at continent, regional, and also country level. So for example, as a continent level, we have African mining vision. As a regional level, for example, we have ECOWAS environmental policy, and at country level, there are 40 Africa countries have policies that's related on environmental energy projects investment, critical minerals, green hydrogen, and also trade on environmental goods. But right now, we realize that there's no Africa country has yet been found to have a holistic environmental goods manufacturing policy. And also the AU, for example, is only talking about a critical mineral strategy, not necessarily a green manufacturing strategy. And this is very concerning. And why? Because there is a strong case for EG, like environmental goods manufacturer in Africa. So I think in our report, we also identify the opportunities, advantage, and economic benefits for manufacturing EG in Africa locally. So Africa's potential for green manufacturing, renewable development, renewable energy development, and environmental preferable products offers pathway to balance economic growth with sustainability. The continent's undeveloped manufacturing sector, abundant resources, renewable resources particular, and availability of resources posit Africa to become a front runner in environmental good production. So localization, environmental goods manufacturing in Africa present the economic benefits through job creation, research and development opportunities, cost saving from reduced import and improved supply chain efficiency. It also promotes regional collaboration and technology transfer. And I think this all provide Africa towards sustainable prosperity while fostering innovation and self-efficiency in green technology. And also, Africa has a potential to be a strong center for manufacturing hub and also to manufacture environmental goods and leveraging its all like advantage, including natural resources, labor, agriculture, minerals, with the added benefits of the integrated markets, like align with AFCFTA and regional collaboration. And this will lead to the economic growth, competitiveness, and also sustainability. So we're exactly as the best country at this moment to like initiate these trends. So we use like the three-step framework to and also with 12 criteria to analysis and also to identify regional hubs in Africa. And what we pick is Kenya, Tanzania, Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Zambia, Egypt, Morocco, Angola, and Congo Republic. So so there are 2 countries from each regions in the Africa continent. We believe there are great potential in local manufacturing of environmental goods. And also why this country specifically as regional hub, and we kind of do a kind of brainstorming and do a market research. And with also our data analysis, and we find that, for example, Kenya, it has a leading economic skills in the region, good economic growth, and also great potential in renewable energy that is driven like electricity. So which we believe is a great opportunity to manufacture renewable energy components and systems like solar panels, storage, and also electric vehicles. So given the time limit, I will not go in depth for 10 countries, but our report will publish soon. So please stay tuned so you can find more from our report. And also we also want to kind of include Chinese engagement, also international development partners engagements in the helping promote environmental goods in Africa. So what's the role of the China and also maybe other development partners in supporting this shift? Following the fourth forecast, like Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in 2021, and the announcement of China-Africa Declaration on combating climate change. The China-Africa climate change cooperation has escalated, so ushering in increased private and public investment to drive Africa's clean energy transit and renewable energy green development. So based on our data, we find out that Egypt, South Africa, and Nigeria lead in environmental goods trade with China, and these three countries also fell into the 10 regional hub we identified. So there are also out of 54 Africa countries, like Chinese climate action projects are primarily dominant on renewable energy, climate-friendly infrastructure, and also clean technology, which related to solar panel manufacture and also electric vehicles. And among the 10 identified regional hubs, Nigeria and Kenya emerged as a top host country of these Chinese climate action projects. And with these projects, China's involvement is driven by energy-focused state-owned enterprises, for example, like Power China. So what will it take for this investment opportunity to be taken up, especially for Chinese investors, but also for other development partners? So based on our interviews and analysis, key challenges right now exist for Africa countries is to localize environmental goods manufacture, including inadequate infrastructure, limited technology capacity, underdeveloped local supply chain, limited access to finance, and maybe some of the big trade barriers. So therefore, recommendation for addressing these challenges, including working with China and also with other partners to invest in green manufacture, green infrastructure, facilitating trade and regulation alignment, establish robust supply chains, and enhance education and skills development. So just let me have a very short conclusion. So Africa definitely stands at a critical juncture, facing the urgent need to combat climate change while pursuing responsible industrialization. So environmental goods manufacture will definitely offer a viable pathway towards this goal. So this journey necessitates global collaboration and sustainable investment in Africa environmental goods manufacture sector for the benefit to our shared future. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Yika, for that brief introduction to our forthcoming report, which we will be publicizing when it's ready. But before we do that, what we do now have is an opportunity to discuss those findings and also really on the ground perspectives as to whether environmental goods manufacturing is here on the continent. Does it have a future? What does a future look like? And what is required from both governments and development partners to make that happen? So to have that discussion, I'd like to invite all our panelists up, and I will introduce them one by one as they join us. So in order of the very left, to my very left, we have Ms. Vandana Thotoli, who is the Business Development Advisor for the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. Thank you very much for joining us. We also have next, a little bit closer, Ms. Dogusan Thakur, who is Director of Programs for the Clean Technology Hub. Thank you very much for joining us. Then we have Ms. Jacinda Njike. Thank you very much. She's the Africa Finance Lead for the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions. Thank you for joining us today. And then Mr. Albin Wilson, who's the Chief Product and Strategy Officer for Rome, and you will find out what Rome is very shortly. And last but not least, online, just behind our panelists, we have Ms. Li Xia, who is the CEO and founder of Shenzhen Power Solutions Company Limited, and will also be sharing her insights as well for this panel discussion. So I guess I could sit down and join you, but let me first kind of ask you as panelists, you know what, I don't mind standing if you don't mind. Let me first put an overarching question to all of you. What would you say is the current status of environmental goods manufacturing on the continent? Is it manufacturing that's thriving? Is it at the early stage? What would you say is the current status? So who would like to kick off on that?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Hannah, for having me here. My name is Vandana Totoli, and as Hannah introduced, I'm part of the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development. I'm based in Nairobi, and I've been here for 10 years, so on the continent. So it's really nice to be participating in such a huge panel right now. And in the event, of course, the summit has been, I think, so far very successful. So I think before we start off, I mean, before I answer her question, I wanted to give a quick definition of environmental goods. I thought, let me just start off with what I had from an online page. It said environmental goods refers to products or commodities that are designed, produced, or used in a way that has a positive impact on the environment. It's such a broad definition, so it includes a wide range of items, which includes renewable energy technologies, like we were showcasing here, solar panels, wind turbines, and so on, energy-efficient appliances, eco-friendly packaging, organic and sustainable agriculture products, pollution control equipment, anything under the sun, frankly, like in that sense, right? So, when it comes to what is the current status, right? Like in terms of many African countries, including Kenya, I think we are at its infancy when it comes to manufacturing of environmental goods. Most importantly, I think even our raw materials that we are producing are not produced in a very sustainable manner, right? We still have a long way to go. And I think even like excessive use of chemical fertilizers and widespread use of fossil fuels for both energy for production and for agriculture. All of this is the situation right now. It's there's still a lot required to change, right? So,
yeah, my name is Dosun. People can't pronounce my name very well, so if you just ignore the G and H there, it's just Dosun Taku. I work with a hub in Abuja. We're into environmental and climate action and also energy access. I think that we are nowhere near the beginning. I think that, but I am very happy that this conversation is something that has started. My hub has been in existence for over 5 years, and it is only now in Nigeria that they are beginning to listen to us. And we have been speaking about climate change for such a long time and how we can start producing things that are more sustainable. But that was not reality for them. I have been saying throughout this summit that there are many communities in Nigeria where they still think that climate change is a myth. And I can't blame them because, as I'll get to talk about it later, education is also a factor into these things. But it is nice to see that discussions are going on around it now. And I believe that, you know, if we continue like this, and then the government decides to sit down and create policies specifically for this kind of sector, I think that we can go far. But for now, I don't think we've actually started, but the positive and the good news is that the conversation has started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Jacinda Njike, and I'm with the high-level climate champions here representing our Africa director, Bokolo Kinawendo, who actually was a minister of investment and trade in Botswana. And so we really do want to highlight that, you know, manufacturing sector is one of the key sectors of the economy in sub-Saharan Francophone Africa, accounting for about 11% of the total employment and about 10% of the GDP as of 2018. 2019. And so this sector has been growing by about 3.8% compared to the global average of only about 2.1%. So we do see a positive trend in growth in manufacturing, but that doesn't speak to necessarily environmental goods. That's just in general for the manufacturing sector. And so even at those numbers, we can see that the manufacturing sector in Africa is still a small portion of our GDP. And so I think that the incentives behind policy need to really be in place in order to encourage the expansion of manufacturing in general, but also in environmental goods. We would like to highlight that, yes, even though, you know, she mentioned critical minerals shouldn't be the only focus, it is a huge opportunity, you know, to have to capture more of the value chain across the African continent for various goods, even in agricultural goods, you know, cocoa, coffee products. So I think that by increasing our manufacturing capabilities across sectors and doing that in a more green and environmentally friendly way, relying on renewable energy sources, hydro electricity, geothermal electricity, as well as solar and wind, I think that we can look at, you know, solutions that can create a more viable and more abundant manufacturing sector. This will take, though, an investment in research and development, because a lot of the properties of African environment are not necessarily the same as external environments. So I think that it's really important that we look at indigenous properties and how we can localize some of these manufacturing and environmental processes to really have an African perspective on the growth and not just kind of copy paste what might be being done elsewhere. So I think that we have a huge opportunity. A lot of youth on the continent, as she mentioned, education is critical. So I know that in the DRC recently, we were there and they're talking about ensuring that battery manufacturing becomes a part of curriculums in higher education, so that they can take advantage of and become part of the value chain and capture more of the revenue, which will improve livelihoods overall. And as the champions, you know, our main goal is to really allow non-state actors to be a part of the process of the policy making and the government discussions. And so it's really important to partner with the organizations like Development Reimagined to highlight the opportunities and also to work together to bring more actors into this space so that we can really develop the pathway forward together and not just let, you know, governments kind of dictate, but also have the private sector saying, this is what we need, this is how we can grow faster, this is, you know, and really pointing it out. So that's why we are so excited to be in this conversation today.
Thank you. My name's Albin, and I work for Rome, and Rome is an electric vehicle manufacturer based here in Nairobi and Bakassi. We're approximately 200 people, and we're building manufacturing and assembly industry from the ground up. Basically, we employ engineers here locally that design and develop all our products. We've launched an electric motorcycle that's fully designed and developed, as well as manufactured eventually here last year, and we're in the process of doing the same with a bus for the Matatu sector. And I think what we see is that a lot of the processes that are actually localized here in Kenya, at least, I don't speak for all of Africa, obviously, are processes that have supply chain benefits, right? So it's larger water tanks, it's very large items that have simpler, you know, manufacturing processes and things like that. And I think our belief going forward is to localize a lot of more of the design and the development, right? Because that makes it inherently easier to implement these manufacturing processes. And what we've seen is now that as we expand the company, obviously there are no incentives here locally yet for these kind of processes. So obviously we go the simple route of trying to produce, you know, welded items, simpler, smaller, non-tolerance dependent items, as well as the larger ones that take a lot of supply chain, obviously have a lot of supply chain cost. And so I think our belief is that it is actually happening. And I think we're driving, I mean, our aim is to become an OEM, so an original equipment manufacturer, and following a lot of, you know, the footsteps that China's taken in the last 30 years, starting with simpler processes, aftermarket parts, and then supply chain benefits. Yeah.
I'm going to borrow that mic. Yeah, thank you. Ms. Li Xia, what's your view in terms of the current state of environmental goods manufacturing on the continent?
Sure. First of all, thanks for Hannah's invitation for this meeting. I'm especially as a Chinese manufacturer, so I'm in this role. So I'm so excited to hear Rome has 200 employees locally. So, but definitely, I think the local manufacturing in Africa is still in the early stage. So I was focusing on solar home appliances for supplying the rural villages to access of the energy in the last 14 years. So I would like to share a little bit about my insights about how the new energy is developing in Africa, especially from the manufacturing part. I just share my screen a little bit. So when we discuss about the accessing of the new energies, what is happening today? From this picture, there are still about 789 million people living in off-grid. But when these people is using the kerosene lamp or just burn the wood, so there are a lot of carbon and emission is generated. So in order to solve this problem, I think I agree with Rome to simplify the products very simply assembling locally. That is, should be the option to reduce the cost of entry into the level. But there is another challenge. Since the World Bank and the IFC program is called Latin Global, is in different countries is subsidized and to ensure people can access affordability. But the challenge is, what about the product is out of the warranty period? Still, the parts is not available. It's generate a lot of e-waste. So I fully agree with Rome. Is if you can produce locally, that means you can repair. So in this case, we suggested the manufacture locally, even now in the early stage. Maybe it should be go in 3 stages simply. First stage, it should be assembling locally. Everybody is talking big and thinking big to make a very modern big factory. Maybe it's not really suitable for the African to start with, to lower the entrance. So what we suggest is leverage Chinese manufacturers' experience assembling locally. And the second stage, I think Rome already made, is parts locally made. So we also agree some parts could be locally made to lower the cost. And the last will be transfer of the technology. So that is the ecosystem we suggested, starting from manufacturing, assembling, and locally parts, and then build the ecosystem for after-sales service to extend the lifespan. So that is our plan. And Power Solution today, our plan is to make a joint venture manufacturer in Ethiopia by the end of this year. We want to leverage our old experience about manufacture to introduce into Ethiopia to join with the local partner and to create more jobs, to help the manufacturer solar industry to set up in Ethiopia market itself. So what I trust is with the young people and a lot of potential talents in Africa, manufacturer in Africa will have a huge market to satisfy its own consumer market for sure in the future. Thank you, Hannah. Over to you.
Great, thank you. And I think even in the vehicle sector in general, there is this idea that you start with local assembly and then go to manufacturing and so on. To what degree do you think, and again, let's put this to all the panelists, but I'll also ask some more specific questions too. But do you think that is the route, or do you think it's going to be important in some ways? Perhaps the need is so strong that there's a kind of leapfrogging as quickly as possible beyond assembly that's required. I just wondered what your thoughts on that might be as a panel.
My personal opinion is that you have to start with something, right? And at Rome, I think we really focus on, we started focusing on building, a design and developing with partners here locally. And then we vertically integrated a lot of the parts and designs with Indian and Chinese manufacturers, right? That have experience from creating tooling tolerance gauges, quality assurance, and things like that. And so we saw that our opportunity is to do full knockdown assembly here in Kenya, right? And that's now come to the point where we feel comfortable with the quality and the throughput and the first pass yields that we're seeing, that we now feel that we can localize a lot of the process. However, on the point of leapfrogging, I think there is potential in bringing robotic welding systems, some of the plastic injection molding machines that we see here in Nairobi. And I think the potential is high to do some of those processes less manual and make it the stage into it much easier. So I think that's the direction we take, at least.
Thank you. So I think there's some different sectors that have different levers. So for example, technology, I think there's a lot of environmentally friendly technology products that can help us really maybe collect data and help us improve some of our systems around environmental investments. I think that those are some of the, maybe I could say, lower hanging fruit, because there is less investment of physical infrastructure necessary to achieve those. I think it's also important to look at like some type of incentives and subsidies. I think I mentioned this earlier, to really help to incentivize investment in those infrastructure that will take longer time rollout. I think that it's important to think short-term, medium-term, and long-term in the process to say, okay, what can we do today with what we have? And then what can we do in the next 3 to 5 years versus what's a more 5 to 10 year plan. And I think that for each country, it's going to look a little different. South Africa obviously has more infrastructure. And so what they can do in 5 years is going to be a lot different than what a smaller country like Chad can do in 3 to 5 years. But at the same time, Chad's renewable energy and their impact from climate change is so dramatic that they have to also move faster in some sectors to kind of negate the impacts of climate change. So I think that over the long run, we will see more infrastructure investment, but I think it's really going to take some movement from government and some incentives from the World Bank and the other AFDB to help provide guarantees, whether it's around foreign exchange rates, whether it's around credit enhancement tools. I think all of these financial incentives will go a long way to helping shorten the timeline, which I think it would naturally take without them.
What we're doing at Clean Technology Hub is to try and, first of all, narrow the sector down to renewable energy and environmental action, and then try and get a community of those kind of people. And then when we do that, then we're able to find out what their challenges are and how best it is we can help them. And when we say helping them, we mean what kind of product do they have? Do we pitch them with investors? And then how do we help them to scale? Because then we need to create some kind of awareness in the community so that people are more and more aware of environmental goods. And so I would agree with her saying that we need to start small. We can't just jump, but we can start from community to community, and then hopefully the government, and I'm not very, very proud of mine, but hopefully the government gets to see the kind of things that we're doing, and then they try to help. Yes, we can, but we need to start very small. I have to particularly keep saying, because I am on the ground and I see how these things are done, and we can't just jump and start like that. The only reason why in my country right now people are looking into e-mobility is because in May, when our president was sworn in, he immediately announced the removal of subsidy. And then the price of fossil fuel jumped to over 300%. And so that affected transportation, that affected food, that affected a lot of things. And so people started thinking, oh, well, what do we do now? We can't use our cars anymore. And then we came back and said, hey, we've been talking about this for 2 years now. So yeah, so I think that if we start small, little community by community, and then we create an awareness, then I think we would get there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Just as a final comment, I think, because I also think that it should be a cautionary approach that we take in manufacturing, jumping into manufacturing full-fledged I think all countries can come up with great policies, but also what the implementation gap in at the local level, right? It's always lack of budgets, lack of regulation, lack of capacities to regulate, and so on. So I think it is good to go with a little bit of a cautionary approach when it comes to manufacturing of environmental goods. Thank you.
So let me switch a little bit to ask you all some more specific questions. And I want to go through the questions around government policy and also about kind of the role of development partners as well. So in terms of government policy, you know, we've found so far we haven't found a government that does, an African government, maybe even any government, that has a green environmental goods manufacturing policy. Now, maybe that's because there is that caution around it. But do you think that would be interesting for governments to explore as a means to getting to net zero? Because it might be about value addition as opposed to extraction. I'm just wondering whether there are views on the panel that would actually make any difference at all in terms of the reality on the ground, in a sense, if governments were to do that. Jacinda, do you want to take that one?
So I think that when you take a step back and look at, you know, the 3,000-foot view, the impact of extracting products and then shipping and then, you know, adjusting them across borders has a huge environmental impact. So I think that when we start to look at it as, you know, how can we improve the environmental impact of products that originate in Africa? You know, you can start to say, okay, this product, if we do more of capture more of the value chain, it not only creates incentives for the local economy, but it also has a positive impact on carbon emission reduction. And so I think that when we can kind of have the data to demonstrate the positive impacts on carbon emission reduction, those types of things can start to be monetized, like maybe through the carbon markets or through other carbon tax incentives, you know, kind of what the UK is doing with this carbon border adjustment mechanism by looking and saying, okay, we need to improve our local production in these ways in order to even access that market, right? There's ESG standards that are going to be preventing a lot of African exports from reaching borders in other countries if we aren't really proactive in how we're, you know, even providing the raw materials that we're providing. So I think that, you know, sometimes we almost have to take a backwards look and say, okay, what is the total cost of not manufacturing on the continent? What is the total impact on the environment? And kind of say, okay, so this 200 million investment required is actually peanuts compared to the impact that we could have by not doing. So I think that sometimes that opportunity cost needs to really be better reflected in the data so that people have a better business case for these major investments, because I think that's really sometimes that impediment is, oh, it's going to be a huge investment. But when we look at the cost of inaction, it can be greater. So I think that the policy and the governments are learning as we are about these impacts and learning to measure and and that's why I said kind of these tech things are almost the precursor to some of the manufacturing opportunities, because we really have to be able to measure the data and understand the broader picture before we really can know what the right solutions are. So I think that, you know, every country should obviously increase their, you know, their production and increase their economic viability in a green way. I think that President Ruto said it best, you know, we can be a green powerhouse, but I think that we need to really understand what that means as far as green manufacturing, right? Like, because that is a huge, we produce things right now. We need to clean up some of the production that we already have going. What does that investment look like? And then the growth also, like they said, of leapfrogging the oil industry, you know, the industrial revolutions methods by doing it in a green way, what is the added value there? So I think there's, you know, one, the existing manufacturing and greening that up or cleaning that up, and then the future manufacturing, ensuring that we do develop in a cleaner way. So I don't think there's a simple like one answer, but I think that together and with more data, I just keep pushing that we can get closer.
Let me come back. Thank you. And the way I think about it, perhaps, and maybe even for the audience, this might be helpful is, you know, before COVID, for example, many African governments, we all, of course, had health strategies, right? And we would import lots of our medicines and so on. But post-COVID, there's been this realization, well, actually, you know, we need pharmaceutical manufacturing strategies and local pharmaceutical, local production. So I guess it's in that context, and kind of expecting that could be an issue, so preempting it. Licia, I want to bring you in again, because again, government policy is very important. In China, of course, you know, you were originally based and your company is still based in Shenzhen, which is one of the major special economic zones. Do you think that those are part of this as well? And if we're talking about manufacturing on the African continent, should there be some alignment between environmental goods manufacturing and special economic zones or industrial parks? Would that make a difference?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I think that is really important. So for all the foreign investors or even the local investors, the most important is the policy transparency and also stable. So I think that is very important. And except the government subsidize or open the policy for free zone, for example, this is also very important to lower the cost to compare to import the whole products. I mean, the ready CBO products. If you're local manufacturer, you will take more risk. For example, you have the labor risk, community risk, and also you have to consider when the local industry is not matured, there are a lot of extra cost for the spare parts, for example. So if the government can try to increase the import taxi for the CBO rather than the SKD, I think the local manufacturer can be encouraged at a lower cost. And also there should be more policy. For example, now if we are discussing about clean energy and also carbon emission. So for the solar and also for the EV, if there is some policy for the carbon credit deals, which can be sold according to local or internationally, especially in our industry, you know, we supply the products to the off-grid in the last mile by retail way. I mean, by different people in different areas. So this carbon is really difficult to be collected, but it's really the commercial way and the sustainable way. If we can sell our carbon credit and get the money paid, and then return to the end user to lower their buying cost for excess of energy, it will be another option that is win-win-win. First, the end users win because they spend less money to get access. And then the environment is win because once they use the solar products, they are not using the kerosene lamp or they just burn the wood, right? And also the government will win because the local manufacturer will create more jobs and technical transfer. And people will be encouraged by the foreign investors will invest locally. So I think this is the first about the government policy. And second, if the government is stable or even the foreign currency, some countries, I don't want to name it, the currency decrease inflation is really changed by 50% during the COVID. So that makes the investor is really afraid. So what is the government policy to secure the investors about the decrease of the currency rate? This is also very important. Everybody is just discussing about the replacing, for example, replacing the kerosene lamp with the solar solutions. What about extension, the lifespan of the products to reduce the e-waste and reduce the carbon emission? I think this topic should be put on the table. That's why I was very excited about Rome. If they were locally manufactured, they can be able to supply the parts and enlarge the lifespan and reduce the e-waste. That activities should be more encouraged and more support from the government. Then will be encourage the new investors. Thank you, Hannah. Over to you.
Thank you, Licia. That's really helpful and very clear in terms of what you feel, is necessary for manufacturing to expand and the opportunities as well in terms of development partners. Let me come back to development partners in a moment, but let me just come back to you, Albin, in terms of the, you're located here in Kenya. I'm sure you also looked and will be looking at other locations and so on as you grow. What are the major factors that really mattered to you in making that investment decision?
Well, I think inherently with manufacturing is that I think we talk about simple and small, and I think they're very different. I think we need to start simple, but I think we need to start big, because unfortunately with manufacturing, it's inherently needs scale. And so I think with Kenya, we saw a stability with government, a willingness from government to assist. And I think, what is probably going to happen in sub-Saharan Africa, at least, is I can't imagine there being more than 3 hubs for manufacturing. And sure, there'll probably be assembly in different places, but it's just not going to happen in every country. So whichever government can combine resources, get the players in place, and scale those players with subsidies and with assistance, with free economic trade zones, with East Africa as a kind of working one, they're going to be the winners. And it takes a lot of will and investments. And I think, with the Kenyan governments that have been and the one that is now, they really see that. And they see that they have the potential to take a leading role in Africa. And also Kenya, I think, is, had the benefit of not having so many raw materials, so had to find different ways of contributing to the economy and growing the economy, unlike Nigeria, which found oil, or Angola that found oil and became very reliant on that. So I think it's a blessing and a curse.
Can I just add one thing? I think one thing that we kind of is the circular economy component of this. Africa has a lot of naturally recyclable incentives, people on a very local level. And I think that sometimes we forget that component. And I think that can be a really integral part of the African manufacturing strategy. I think Lee mentioned that, it's important to have extending the lifespan of products to help eliminate the environmental waste and risks. And I think here we do have a really, indigenous recycling approach that should be leveraged to impact the long-term manufacturing capacity.
Great, thank you. Great contributions. And yeah, I like the circular economy reference, and also the simple but big. Definitely a good takeaway. Let's just finish before we go into the Q&A with yourselves, our audience here and online. In terms of the role of development partners in supporting environmental goods manufacturing, have we seen it happen at all? Is it happening? And what would need to be in place for it to happen? Perhaps, Vidana, we can start with you on that one in terms of development partnerships on this topic.
Sure. Maybe I can give an introduction of my own fund to kind of say that maybe this is, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
It is. Oh, just to start off, because I think an introduction to my fund might be helpful in how we are able to stimulate manufacturing on the continent, for example, right? So the Dutch Fund for Climate and Development, DFCD, was set up in 2019 with the support of the Dutch government. And it is implemented or managed by FMO, which is a Dutch Entrepreneurial Development Bank, CFM, Climate Fund Managers, SNV Netherlands Development Organization, and Worldwide Fund for Nature, WWF Netherlands. So the fund has three components. So one is an origination facility, which is coming up with a grant and a technical assistance facility, which helps companies to become investment ready. And then they are graduated to two facilities. One is the land use facility, and which is led by FMO, and a water facility, which is led by CFM. So such combination of providing grant plus technical assistance plus investment, be it debt or equity, I think it's very useful as for companies, I'm sure, like private sector on the continent. So if similar initiatives are scaled, like there a lot more funds like this come to which are there, but in different spaces, right, or different ticket sizes, right? Like anywhere between $2,000 requirement all the way to 10 million and above kind of requirements. So in this case, like I think that's one of the ways that development finance can support manufacturing of environmental goods, right?
Thank you. Any other thoughts on development partners?
Yeah, so we're partnering with the New Energy Nexus and COP28 in Dubai, where we're trying to see how we can get entrepreneurs with ideas, especially entrepreneurs from the global south. And we're trying to see how we can put them through a boot camp, see what kind of ideas they have, and we'll train them and hopefully take them to Dubai, where they go meet with investors and pitch their ideas to them. So that is one way that we're looking at seeing how we can expand this manufacturing sector, because if we have these ideas and we're able to get the money for it and then, start small and then grow. But we have to be, I know we talk about development partners, but we must always think about the government as well, because if the policies are not in place, for instance, the investment will not even come to whoever it is. So we have to be sure that those people are coming from countries where policies are in place to protect them, to protect the investors as well, and to make sure that those goods actually scale.
And so the Climate Champions team is actually working with several partners like UNECA, SE for All, GAP on various streams. So one of our projects is a UN compendium of climate projects. And so we're working with project developers across the world, in fact, with all the regional economic commissions to really help them be investment ready. There is all of this capital that's saying we are $1 trillion of climate capital is available. And then you have all these project developers saying, we have all of these projects, but then the project developers say we can't access the capital, and the financiers are saying we can't find viable projects. And so what we're really trying to do is really bring those two groups together, make sure that the projects do have the support, like she's mentioning, to be viable. Maybe it's just data that's missing. Maybe it's formatting of your information, your financial statements that needs to be improved. Sometimes project developers really just need a little bit of project origination support to get those projects past the line so that the financiers can come in and help them. So I think that that can be the role of some international development partners. And then also we're working closely with the Africa Carbon Markets Initiative. And I know there's been some criticism, but I think that it's one of many tools that we should leverage in order to access finance. I always joke, but it's interest-free. It's not repayable, and it reaches, if it's properly structured, it reaches the ground and really helps with projects like solar irrigation, with rice farmers that are reducing the amount of emissions that they're making. It can be from agricultural to renewable energy to larger scale manufacturing projects around electric vehicles and e-mobility. So I think that we really have to be creative, and that's why I always mention, it has to be African, for by African developers, because they will know how to structure them in order to improve their viability. And yes, we may need some guidance. Carbon markets can be a complicated space. It can be very intimidating for people who don't really understand how it works, but that's where that capacity building from these development partners can also help to really inform the communities on how they can use these tools to really build their economic growth strategy. So I think that it's going to take and Forex guarantees. It's going to take the restructuring of the international financial architecture, which is on the plate. You know, everyone is needing to look at how they address climate action. And so I think that those things together, we should partner and really learn about these things so that we can use them better to our own local advantage.
Thank you. And Licia and Albin, have you taken advantage of development partners to be able to expand and do what you're doing and on planning to do? Or is there still a gap?
Well, I think as Rome, we have a lot of development finance. So I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about it yet, but we have a working capital partner, because obviously inherently manufacturing has physical goods, and physical good costs money, and they take shipping time and things like that. So financing and you know, working capital financing is a huge part of making manufacturing actually work. However, I think there is one part that's actually missing, and that you need a lot of experience, because it's very difficult to manufacture. So I think, you know, with all this, it is a lot of the experience that needs to be assisted with getting manufacturing here. We can't just throw money at it locally, right? And there are great countries in the world that have achieved, you know, tremendous success over a very short period of time, that I think there's a lot of copying to be done.
Licia, in terms of development partners, what role can development partners, including China, play?
Yeah. So I think to make the local manufacturer to be success, everybody need to working with partners. China partners' role is the advantage of experience of a manufacturer. The last 20 years, China manufacturer is very mature. I think we have a lot of experience we can share. And also we need to leverage with, for example, US fund or European fund for the impact investment is also very mature. And I just heard about the carbon emission is also a lot of program. And also SE for all, the some organizations is trying to subsidize and empower. So where is the gap? We need to think about it. Why Chinese manufacturers also complaining we cannot enter into Africa land, but actually we want to. We want to be localization manufactured. Why the African enterprises is also complained they cannot get resources, the right partners, or the fund, or the right investment to start with the manufacturers. Or even the investors is also complain we have money and we are ready to invest in Africa. We feel is plenty and big future market, potential big market future. So I think maybe we need to work it out. Where is the gap to genuine, to union these peoples together and to work it out how to lower the entrance. I fully agree with some of the panelists' discussion is we should start something easy, small, low entrance, and to make every people to learn, trust, and then grow together. Thank you. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you, Licia. So we will be needing to wrap up very soon, but I would really love to have an opportunity to have our audience ask some questions. We have one over here, another over here, and perhaps one more that we could take, and then we will put those to first here. So just have those two questions, and then we'll do the panelists, and then we'll go to our closing.
Hello. Yes, Alex Benkenstein from South Africa. So very quickly, I mean, fantastic tone of this discussion, and perhaps this discussion kind of obviates the question, but it seems to me that certainly the discussion in South Africa around the just transition, but also in the rest of Africa about enhancing energy access, there's such an imperative to get access to renewable technologies as cheaply as possible so that they can displace fossil fuel-based energies, so that they can drive access to energy in areas that don't have energy yet. And then you've got the question of scale, and China just does dominate that market. And we're talking here about solar manufacture, we're talking about battery manufacture. We've kind of heard a different narrative at this discussion, and that's fantastic. But is that a false tension that the countries face about the drive to get access to these technologies and products as cheaply as possible, versus this imperative for local manufacturing. But very quickly, I want to sneak in a question just about e-mobility, and there's already a lot of internal combustion vehicles being imported into Africa. And as e-mobility surges in the more developed markets, this is probably just going to accelerate. So again, this tension between providing that mobility, low cost old tech coming into the continent versus what we really want, which is to have local manufacturing and to be adopting those new technologies.
Thank you very much. Great set of questions there. Could we have this next question here? And we have a third question behind there as well. And then we'll put those to the panelists and then wrap up. I hope, yeah, John, she's this lady here first with the yellow, yeah, and then behind.
Hello, my name is Virozia Nokech. I work with an NGO in Kenya, and we are looking to get into climate change interventions for the communities where we live, where we work. And actually, my question now is not directly for them, but to Alvin, who is doing the electric car manufacturing. Sometime earlier this year, I saw a debate by the US Senate about going green, adopting the electrical vehicles. And I think there it's already been adopted to a larger scale than we do have here. And the argument they had, the senators were asking that, okay, if we go electric, we'll need a higher volume of hydroelectric manufacturing. Have we factored how much we will need production per year, and do we have it? And I think there was not an immediate answer, meaning they hadn't thought about it in that context. So I'm thinking, if they've begun adopting it and they haven't thought about it, what about us? You mentioned the government is willing to assist, but we can be willing to assist, but don't know what to do. Has our government thought about it in that context? And I know for you to come here, you must have thought about what does the future look like for you? Because we've had, in Kenya, we have a lot of startups every now and then, and we hear about them at the point where they've secured huge funding, and then it just goes silent. And after a few years, you can't find them. You don't even remember their name or how to look for them. And you're wondering, because when it was announced, you're like, yeah, this is a need that is being met. We are going to need this. So you wonder, like, why did it disappear? Because you are thinking the market was there. So something went wrong somewhere in between. So what does the future look like for you? And with the government, have you engaged with them in a way that is ensuring that you're operating now, but there's future for your organization to grow and expand your operations, so that at the end of the day, we also need to be factoring in that when we go green, does it have a cost in terms of another resource that may hinder the growth? And in terms of hydroelectric power, is it just, will solar energy meet the need for charging the electric vehicles, or would it have to be hydroelectric power? Plus, just another small, how will we charge those vehicles in Kenya? Because electricity is really expensive. And even if you showed me that it's a normal charging port, we'd be thinking, I don't want to add that to my electricity bill. So
some very practical questions. Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have another question there. And we think we do have one question online, and that will be that. So, yeah.
Any thoughts about carbon tax? We talked about working capital, and how might it incentivize manufacturers' participation in the carbon credit markets versus the asset allocation decisions to continue operating or to establish operations in those countries that are implementing the carbon tax?
Thank you very much. Very good practical questions. I'm going to give you the online question as well, which is, what has your experience been engaging with the educational sector to create the future talent to support and maintain the environmental goods production and operations? So we've got 4 really great questions. I'm not going to suggest that every panelist answers them, but please do answer the one that you feel is most relevant, that you can give the best insights into for us. And that will be, we'll have a final wrap up.
Well, I think I'll answer the electric vehicles one. No, I think we have support from the government, and I think the thesis behind our business is that we can rely on ourselves without subsidies. So, for example, Kenya has 92% renewable energy production, right? 22% overproduction, which just goes to waste, and we think that could be used. And so, for electric vehicles and charging, our motorcycles you can charge out of any outlet in the wall where you charge your phone. The buses, you obviously need a specific grid infrastructure that's on a predefined route. And when it comes to hydropower, obviously, manufacturing into today, you couldn't refine steel in Kenya because the grid just couldn't handle it, right? So hydro is one of the renewable sources which you can have a steady flow of renewable energy production. It's not intermittent like solar and wind. You can control it depending on the industry's opening hours or production hours, which means that yes, hydroelectric will be an essential part of any manufacturing industry or any large scale grid effort, is my personal belief. Or we have to choose fossil fuels, right? That's just how it is, and that's how energy works, right? Yeah, and then I think subsidies do help accelerate things. And I think, here in Kenya, we see, a different dynamic with specifically automotive products on a dumping ground kind of question, is that there's more players on our market than just the end user. We have clients who are the financiers, which have then outstanding debt, which means that the quality of the product needs to be sufficient enough to last the full asset financing period, right? Which means that the decision maker is not entirely the end user, but also the financing institution, right? So the dynamic changes a little bit for our industry, not maybe for the electronics industry and consumer electronics industry, but that's how I think about it. And yeah, that's what I think about for our product specifically.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly, you cannot tell governments how to govern. So carbon tax is going to be a local government decision and how they manage their budgets. But it is definitely true that the local governments will have to look at the climate risks and how that impacts their budget. They will have to look at the potential, impact of energy transition on their budgets. So I think that at one point, many governments will decide to penalize at some level the use of fossil fuels in order to incentivize the use of renewable or cleaner energies. I think that it can be a motivator, obviously, to invest in those type of resources. But I think that at the end of the day, it really is going to be, governments deciding based on their budgetary requirements and their local economic makeup, whether it is a viable or whether the benefit will be worth, the actual implementation. Again, the CBAM and the other things that are being put in place across the globe are impacting businesses. And so they are having to look at how they structure their products and their production in order to increase their ability to access these markets. So I think that every government will have to take that decision for themselves, but it can be a tool to incentivize the transition.
Yeah. Brilliant. And I'm being encouraged to really wrap up. So please, just 2 minutes from all of the rest of the panelists.
Oh, okay. I was going
Just
to
on
take the one on education.
Yes, it's
Right.
perfect for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so we start actually very young. We start in primary and secondary schools, and we try to make them aware of this. So part of the reason why people don't see it as something important is because we don't paint it as the problem that it is. And so when we tell the children and we tell the teenagers, and then we tell even the youths that this is a problem and the solution is right here with us. We have it, we don't have to go buy it or anything, and we can solve this problem, and then, hey, we can make money out of it. And so when you give that to them and you educate them in that way, they grow up and then thinking how they can, solve problems, and then, of course, leading up to scale and all that. So education for us, it's a personal thing for me, and this is my experience, that I have to catch them young and let them know about this, and then they grow with it, and then hopefully get a solution. Yeah.
Great. And also aspiring to manufacturing, of course. Licia, did you want to
Thanks.
respond?
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. I want to discuss about our the education things. So maybe it's not really for the manufacturer, but recently we launched one pilot in Kenya. It's called Solar Media. If everybody can go to for YouTube or Facebook, you can find the link. So in the last mile, no electricity and also no digital contents, how to deliver the digital contents to increase the education awareness for the last mile. So we used a solar charged equipment, something is called Solar Media, can transfer the digital education. And we are so happy to see the people is learned from the digital contents about the skills and to increase their income and also to learn how to agriculture more, increase their productivities. So I think in the African education is a little bit challenge, but still there will be the solution. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you very much. And just as an anecdote, my son doesn't talk about cars. He talks about electric cars versus polluting cars. So yeah, you know, the kids, he's only 7. So to finish off, thank you so much to our panelists. We have our partner, African Climate Foundation, who's just going to kind of just provide a very, very quick wrap up for us. Fikayo Akarodolu, sorry, who's joining us. So thanks again to the panelists and to our audience for your great questions and inspiration. Over to you, Fikayo.
Okay, I think that's working. Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Fikayo. I'm China Africa Program Officer at the African Climate Foundation, which is the first African-led strategic grant maker working at the nexus of climate change and development. And I think the conversation today is really timely. I thought it was funny when you mentioned the Nigeria joke, because I don't know if this is obvious, but I'm Nigerian and I've been talking with my family members living in Nigeria and everyone now has a solar panel, but mainly because the subsidy was removed and fuel prices have just skyrocketed. So everyone I know now is installing a solar panel or something along those lines. And I guess the joke is one way or the other, we prevent climate change because fossil fuels become too expensive in certain places. But I think what I'll just say is I'll tie back the conversation today into the work we're doing. There's a project the ACF is working on called the Renewable Energy Manufacturing Initiative. And the crux of that is really working with manufacturers in China, like Miss Alicia, and working with manufacturers as well on the continent to see how we can unlock approximately $850 million to really sort of advance that clean energy manufacturing capacity on the continent. And, you know, please visit our website, speak to me to learn more about that. But we're effectively really pushing for that sort of environmental goods production and manufacturing on the continent. I think one of the things about the ACF is we're very proactive and we want a world where, you know, there's really comprehensive action. So it's not just, you know, coming to Kenya to have a conversation. It is, what is the next step? How are we moving forward? And obviously, I think one thing we can all agree on is there's more work to do, working with, you know, various partners. And one of the things we're also sort of working or at least pushing for is more government buy-in on the continent to see the ways that governments can be involved. So again, please, you know, read up about the ACF, read up about Partners Development Reimagined, and, you know, we will continue to urge for comprehensive action on this topic. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your patience with us. Take care.